I think I know what this is. I think I know where I'm going. I think I know what I want, but I'm open to that possibly changing. I'm open to something happening that helps me to see that, oh, this is actually what it's really about. I thought I was doing this, but it's actually shown me that what I'm really doing is this. It can really help us discover greater meaning, and it can take us from that place of sort of copying and emulation and all that stuff, and take us into a place of like, oh, holy shit, I've really am starting to discover who I am in this.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Welcome to the show, podcast people. It's another one with Brandon and Evan. And this one actually is kind of a throwback for us in a way, because we used to call these not so serious Sundays. That's the origin of it. And what we would do is we would just kind of free ball. We would just kind of go, let's just talk it out and let's find our way there. And this is kind of cool because if you haven't joined us for one of these conversations, you get to experience us kind of finding our way into this. We kind of have a bit of an idea of what we'll talk about, but we didn't come up with the title. We don't exactly know where it's going to go. And it's a bit more of a discovery conversation. So that's always pretty cool. But I think what we're talking about, Evan, I think what we're going to try to talk about is we're kind of trying to talk about, finding your own voice as an artist and what that is. And also the kind of the modeling and the copying that we do as artists, where we play at something versus when we actually find our own like true authentic voice and create with it, which are kind of, they kind of overlap. But I think the goal of any serious artist, and really any person that really wants to truly like take control of their life, is to try to get to a place of real authenticity. So you're not just a copy of everything you've seen and heard and experienced, where you actually have something really truthful come out of you, and you might not even know what that is until it comes out of you. It can be very spontaneous. So that's kind of the direction we're going in. What this will end up being, we'll only know by the end of it. So thanks for joining us. And I don't know if you got anything to add, Evan, but might as well throw it in now.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be kind of doing one of these throwback conversations where we just sort of hit the record button and go, with sometimes with no real idea or direction, and sometimes with just sort of a glimmer of an idea to get into. It's not Sunday, so that's the one. But that's okay. You can have one of these conversations.
No one has to know.
But now I've outed us, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be some good stuff that we can navigate into with this one, because I think that's I think that this is one that will probably have a kind of, we'll probably be referencing a lot of the arts in this one, particularly our own arts backgrounds that we have, because this is particularly pertaining. I'm interested in seeing if we can find some broader, implications to some of these things. But, and actually, now that I think about it, a few already come to mind, because it's really sort of what we were talking about coming into this is about learning, like how we begin to learn things. And so coming at it from the arts, like when you're first learning to like act, I'll go with whatever sort of like my first sort of thing was, like learning to act. It was a lot of mimicry. And I'm actually and I'm a fairly solid mimic. I can do some pretty decent impressions and stuff like that. And, it came as a result of, I loved the movies as a kid, was like live theater, like where I wasn't really a thing where I grew up and where I was born, at least not on a high level. So it was movies, right? The movies were that magic for me, and watching, a lot of different actors who I liked. It was like all the ones who entertained me, and the ones who and even beyond that, even just certain tropes in storytelling and scenes that would that play out, that come up over and over again, and just beginning that like a process as like a kid and a teenager of sort of just putting myself into that, like trying out how they said something, or trying on sort of an emotion or whatever, and that was sort of where I began, I would say, probably a lot of like my exploration into acting. My first sort of steps into it was all just sort of emulating and copying the people who I liked, the people who I admired. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, but I think that if you stay in that space, if you stay there, that's when it can become a problem.
I agree. I think it's a stage. And I actually think it's a necessary stage. There is nothing wrong with it. It's actually, I think, an essential stage in the progress of creativity, because, I think back to, I don't know, like a silly little thing, like, watching my parents, do life and then modeling the way they did it as a kid. My mom used to wear heels. This sounds really silly, but I think there's a lot of little boys out there that did this. And I snuck into my mom's closet and put on her heels and tried walking around in them just to see what it was like.
I've done that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of embarrassing, but at the same time, when you're a kid, there's this kind of like, I want to try that. I want to see what that's like. And it's not that you're necessarily copying all the time, but sometimes you want to try it. You want to do what they're doing. And it's not even that you necessarily want to do it the way they're doing it, but that's your best reference. So you kind of do it the way they do it because that's what you've seen. Mm-hmm. And I think the more experienced artists, they start to find the courage sometimes and the bravery to step outside of what they've seen and go like, I just have this feeling. I have this sense. I've never seen it done before. I have this idea or this vision or this sound of music in my head, and I just want to try it. And it's not that they don't know where they got it from, because there's no specific place, but it kind of somehow got collected inside of them, put through their own process, and now it could come out. And I think it takes a little bit of courage to put that out, because sometimes you don't understand what's inside of you, and it doesn't make sense. And because you have no reference point, you don't know if it'll be good because it's never really been done, but that's what makes it original. But I do think the whole modeling period is very important. And I know for myself as a filmmaker, a lot of the early stuff that I made, I just thought it would be fun to do. And it wasn't my most original stuff, but the thing is that it was fun. And that was the point. And I think a lot of our creativity, it can begin by just being fun. And it's not about being original. It's just about enjoying the process of trying to create something even if you're drawing a cartoon character that you saw on TV, that could be fun to do. It's not original, but it takes skill and technique, and you have to learn. So it's all part of the process.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many areas I want to go into with everything that you've just said. Because it's like very often all right. Because we think of, we've even said like emulation is like a stage, as if it's like a beginner stage. And the thing is, I don't know if it necessarily is just a beginner stage. It's sort of just like, because I think that we continually become beginners again in our lives, even when we're in fields and crafts and art and artists and arts that we've maybe been in for a long time. Because I think that, we can still look at something that someone has done and say like, that's really interesting what they just did. And I think that it's maybe learning to use that emulation from a different space. You know what I mean? Like having a different perspective on that thing. Whereas when you're really green, you know, when you're a beginner, you're just like, I've never done this thing before in my life. You know, like I've never written a script. I've never, you know, made a film kind of thing. You know, you're just sort of looking at the people that you like and you say like, all right, well, I want to try that and I want to try that and I want to see how they did this and how this all works. And you know, there's beautiful learning that happens in that process. You know, there's a lot of really wonderful things that you can take away from that. And maybe along the way, as you're doing that, you find these little windows where something of you kind of comes into it, where it's just like, okay, well, I'm doing this scene or this shot that's like something straight out of a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
You know, but you know what? What if we did this? You know, and sometimes those little what ifs are completely innovative. You know, they're completely and they're really wonderful. And when you can pay attention to those things, you can start to get a sense of your own sensibilities. And that's, I think, at an early stage. And then I think that as you get more experience and you start to get more sort of knowledge and technique and all of those things, and you start to become more in tune with those sensibilities, you can look at what somebody has done, you know, that you really appreciate and admire and you're inspired by, and you can go, well, that's really interesting. I want to try that just to see what it does to me.
Mm.
You know, as opposed to I'm just trying to copy and paste this. I'm actually going to do this because I want to see how I respond to that process. I want to see how I respond to tackling something in that way and see if it inspires something original in me.
I like that. I mean, I think that's one of the better ways to come from modeling or you know, like just copying something is how does this feel for me? Like, I just think like when I was younger, like I wanted to make like these action movies and war movies and stuff like that. The whole idea of getting things to explode and run around with guns and stuff and just, you know, be a part of something like that just sounded so fun. It looked so fun. And I think when I was doing it from that place, there were some cool things that happened. But in the times where I was doing something to try and make it like something else, and you know, this goes for writing and acting and other things too, that's when you kind of rob yourself of something, because it's like, I'm doing it because I think this looks good and I want to look good, or I want to be liked. I remember getting an audition, probably happened many times, but I remember getting an audition and then reading one of the lines. And I remember saying to myself, I remember saying, oh, I know how to say that line. And I look back at that and I go like, there's no possible way that you know how to say that line. Like now that I'm more experienced, I understand that. But at the time, I realized that I was actually quite limited, because thinking that I knew how to say the line as like I found the answer to that particular part was somehow the one and only and the best answer.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. But, you know, I think maybe there's a younger actor or a newer actor listening to this and going, wasn't that how it is? You know, like that's maybe what I would have thought. But then as you start to realize that the way you'll say that line will be a discovery to you in that moment. You won't even, if you're truly authentically doing it, if it's truly real and it's truly coming as a present dynamic thing that is absolutely unpredictable and totally interesting, you'll discover it at the same time everyone else does. And, you know, and that takes a certain amount of letting go of control. It takes a certain amount of being willing to look like a fool, being willing to do it, quote unquote, wrong, because you might actually do something that doesn't work. But then you recover. And just to carry this on, I was in acting class one time. I remember I was doing this scene with another actor, and we had the scene in like a kitchen or something, and I think they were cooking, And at some point, we got into a bit of a tussle, and we spilt like the spaghetti. And I remember being like, oh shit. And I was like, at first I was trying to like that was a mistake, right? And it was almost stopping the scene for me. And I remember my teacher going, work with it, use it, like use this. This is good, and really encouraging that to be an okay thing. And when we both kind of stopped making it a mistake and we let it be a part of the scene, it made the scene actually way more interesting. And it was a totally unforeseen incident that no one had planned. It wasn't directed and it wasn't supposed to happen. But if I positioned myself as a director in that scene and that happened, I might have been like, okay, you know what? We need to spill the spaghetti in this scene. Like,
Yeah.
it should be spilled. Like that. What a great discovery, but you can only discover it by fumbling through and letting the spontaneous moment occur.
Yeah, and really, really allowing that. Yeah, no, it's because sometimes that can really make it, and that's this is a very sort of actor specific thing, but a lot of people don't realize that, like a lot of these, like the plays and like especially like a lot of the classics that are written, there's these stage directions or just different directions that are given to the actor, and you read that and you go, it's just like, oh, okay, so you've got to do that, or that's, like, because they wrote that in. So often that stuff came in just because of the process of how a lot of scripts are written. So like that was never there originally. But then that script goes to like a theater company and they start workshopping it and whatever. And so the actors get a hold of it, and the writers are very often present during those early stages, seeing their play up on its feet, seeing what works and what doesn't. Some of the lines don't work. There's a lot of sort of like fixing that goes along the way. But very often an actor does something that wasn't written there, and everyone goes, oh my God, that was incredible. Put that in. Right. And so it becomes, and then it becomes printed. And then we kind of get an attachment to, okay, well, this is what has to be done, not realizing that it was something that came spontaneously from an actor, from a performer in that moment that created it. And it's bizarre because then we as actors try to like just repeat that, just try and recreate, as opposed to just like, well, let's just do like the fundamental things right and see what kind of spontaneous stuff happens for us. You know what I mean? Because then that's real. That's something that's come out of this moment, as opposed to some moment that happened for somebody before, right? But I think that's a really interesting part of this conversation about emulation, because that's so often the case is someone does something truly incredible, like in whatever they do, and you see what they've done, and it takes everybody's breath away. And then we go about this process of trying to like just recreate that thing, whereas that's not like, if that person in that moment, we'll just use actors so I can get more specific, but like so often people I find that actors get hung up on the wrong things. They see like an actor on stage or whatever do something, and they get hung up on some little detail about what they did. It's like, oh, in that moment, and then they did this with their voice, or when they turned away, or this or that, and it really like it genuinely strikes something in that actor, but then they just try and just copy it. They just try and whatever, because they think that was the thing that made it great, not realizing it was the thing that was underneath it that made it great, the like where it came from that made it great. And that thing, if we've discussed anything about sort of genuine creativity on this show, it's an unknown, right? Like that actor, that thing that they didn't necessarily know that they were going to do that. And it just happened. And that's the reason why it was great. But like, this is like the weird kind of confusion that happens. It was one that I know that I had, which was like, oh, okay, like you have to control all of it. You have to, I don't know, you have to force those moments into being. You have to, manipulate it to be that way. as opposed to, when I learned just like, no, if you just let go, and take care of these other things, those moments take care of themselves, and you also don't know what kind of a moment is going to hit somebody either.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, the thing is that we're so arrogant in many ways to think that we know, right? To even think that we know ourselves. And it's just kind of I think that we have culturally, we have a lot of confusion around things. Like, I think in this day and age, a lot of people are under the impression that they need to know who they are, that's like something that you need to know, that you need to have figured out. And I think there's things that you can know what you stand for. There's things you can know that, like, I truly feel this is good and this is not good. I feel like this is the kind of person I would like to be and the kind of person I wouldn't like to be. But you saying, like, I'm this person that I would like to be, or I'm this person I wouldn't like to be, is inherently false, because the only way to know that is in hindsight. And in hindsight, it's not even clear, because, for example, I use this example in my course that I teach about knowing yourself and about, who are you as a person? And naturally, when we tell a story, we usually don't tell stories that make us look bad, just on in general. Sometimes we do, but sometimes we do tell stories that make us look bad, but it's really to make us look good. Because what we're really doing is we're trying to show people we're humble, or trying to make them laugh or something like that. So we're really not doing things that are honest that way, right? So I shared this story where my best friend at the time in high school, him and I were kind of having a bit of a tiff. We were fighting, kind of whatever. We were just kind of mad at each other, right? And I was kind of annoyed with him. And I remember we were in class and this bully started picking on him. And I could have stood up for my friend and I could have stopped it, but I didn't, because I was upset with my friend. And then he looked at me and I saw him look at me because I hadn't stood up for him. And I felt so much shame after that. I felt embarrassed. I felt weak. I felt like it wasn't the person I wanted to be. And if you were watching that in a movie and you saw me do that, you would think that guy's an asshole. That guy's like a loser. I don't like him. You know what I mean? And you shouldn't, because it's not a likable quality, right? And the other thing, though, is that I've had that moment was a teaching moment. And if I'm honest about it and I don't deny how I was, and I don't pretend that, I don't excuse myself for my actions, if I own the fact that I was weak at that moment, and that I was cowardly at that moment, and that I was, petty, it allows me to have character growth. It allows me to have the opportunity to be that guy that I know I want to be. That was a teaching moment of who I don't want to be. And I decided after that had happened that I'll never not stand up for somebody because I'm upset with them. And I was joking with my friend on the weekend, and I said to them, I don't always like you, but I always love you. Or I love you always. I don't always like you, but I love you always. But that's kind of, that kind of quality is, you know what? It doesn't matter. I might not like you in this moment. I might be upset with you, but my love, which is more my character, that's not going to go away. So I might not like you in this moment, but this love that we have is never threatened, because whether I like you or not, that way we can be honest with each other. We can tell each other the real things we need to tell. We can say what we really need to say. We can be in our integrity. We might not be happy with it. We might even be having a bad day, and we're going to have forgiveness and grace for each other. But this love isn't going to be threatened by those petty little things. But this little high school version of me had to learn that. Now, am I defined by that high school moment? If you think I am, then you're limited. And if I think I am, I'm limited. Because we're all going to have moments that are not good moments. but they don't make us who we are. And yet we carry these things in our life and we say, I'm like this and I'm like that. And it's like, no, you're not. You're the worst piece of shit in the world, and you're the best human being in the world, all in one package. You're all of that all the time. And at any moment you could flip into one or the other. You could be the hero of the story all the way to the end, and then you could do something absolutely devastating and you could destroy the whole thing. Or you could be the worst person in the world, and then all of a sudden there's a moment where it really matters and you show up in the most important way. And it's like everything you ever did is almost forgiven. So who are you really? It's all inside of you. So part of, I think, this talk is like, if we can carry that kind of like, I don't really know who I am for sure. I can be anything that I want. And then you just go, well, I'm going to try to be these things because that's what I want to be. But you're still, even if you want to be it, you're not it. But wanting to be is a very admirable thing. It's a very wonderful, amazing thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The want to want it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just wanting to want it though. Like it's like you genuinely like wanting to be a good actor and not being a good actor, but wanting to be is a very admirable thing. Mm-hmm. Wanting to want actually means that you want to be a good actor, but you're not willing to do what it takes to be a good actor. You're not willing to even try. So, you know, I had to stop that one in its tracks because like there is a lot of wanting to want, you know, mm-hmm. that we do. And we need to call ourselves out on that. And we say, no, you know what? I'm not really doing it. I want to do it, but I'm not doing it. And then, you know, and not making yourself like lazy or bad because you're not doing it, but just going like, that's the honest truth, mm-hmm. you know, because the truth at the end of the day is, I think, a key element to this conversation we're having.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, you bring up an interesting, side to this story as far as like, you know, I don't know if we're getting sort of off of our original topic or not, but whatever. This is the Not So Serious, so we're just going where we're just going where the wind blows. But basically, that, you know, we so often like we desire to have just sort of like hard, fast rules for things in our lives and you know, guiding principles, like, you know, hey, like guiding principles are like, to me, like they're a double-edged sword because they can really help you and they can really screw you and they can really limit you at the same time. And like, you know, because it's like everything is so I think that the negative side of it is that it can keep us from being able to actually truthfully respond to the moment, the reality of our lives, you know, from second to second. That's kind of what can happen because we're constantly projecting these sort of things in our mind onto the situation, and it keeps us from very often being able to properly see whatever situation it is. So like, for example, like I myself am, I mean, I don't know if I would consider myself a pacifist, but I'm pretty like borderline on that. Like I have no sort of, it's all so dependent on the circumstance, right? Like as a general thing, I'm not a believer in violence to solve problems. You know, like it's just like that's and I could say never really been in a fight before in my life. You know, like I've always managed to, you know, create sort of a peaceful situation and resolve situations as they've like come up. Just because I'm like, well, like, what are we going to just start beating on each other? Like, that just seems kind of like a stupid thing to do. So if my whole thing was just like, oh, well, I just don't believe in violence and I will never yada, yada, yada. But then if I'm, and I've thankfully never been put into this position, but like if I was just I don't know, out in the world one day walking through a park or something, and I saw somebody like harming a child, like hurting a child, you better fucking believe that I'm going to probably get violent with that person. You know what I mean? Like it's an extreme sort of example, but it's one of these things where it's like, you can't just have hard rules because life doesn't operate that way. You know, it's moving and it's changing and it's shifting. You know, there's always, you know, every sort of principle that you have has a circumstance that it hasn't met yet.
Yes.
And it probably has several circumstances that you haven't met yet.
A million. I mean, it's like you just never know until you're there. You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you don't know what you're made of. I mean, I think in our culture, I mean, it's so comfortable. It's just like, for especially Western culture. I mean, it's so easy on us. Like, people say their life's hard, but it's so easy on us. Like, compared to what it could be, you know, but we normalize it, and we think that a hard day for us is like, oh, I had to stay late at work, or, you know, I didn't get enough sleep, or, you know, I don't have enough money right now, or whatever. Like, we think that's hard. And it's like, that's not fucking hard. You have, like, if you really want to know what hard is, like, you can look outside of your little bubble and you can start to find out, like, you know, what it is. And also, like, look, we could lay out a series of situations. You know, as a writer, this is something you might do, where you might go, okay, well, let's say you're my character who's quote unquote pacifist, the guy that doesn't believe in violence. All I need to do is develop that character, put that kind of point on him, and then push him as far as I fucking can to get him to be violent, you know? And then I watch this character go, and I get people to watch this character go from being a passive, anti-violent person to seeing what it would take to get them to be violent, you know, to get them to participate in that. And that could be just to prove the point that, you know, there is a place, you know, that violence for everybody, you know, and maybe the person still says, well, I won't be violent. And maybe, you know, maybe there's a consequence of it. Right. The thing is there's an infinite number of things. And until you're put in the situation, you don't really know what you'll do. And that's why I say, like, we don't really know who we are. And I think, to kind of bring this back to what we started with, you know, the playing it stuff is an attempt to find out who you might want to be, who you might want to play at. Because, like, the guy I am today is just a series of things I've decided to play with. But, like, what's inside of me and what's possible could be totally different. And provided that I met different people and had a different journey in my life, maybe you and I didn't meet, maybe I dated different people, maybe I took on some different jobs, or maybe a certain job went through that didn't go through, things like this. Who knows who I'd be? Because there would have been a whole new different set of experiences and a whole bunch of things I might have played at. And I think that we kind of struggle with that because we like to think that there's this thing inside of us that's like going to keep us true all the time. But that might be kind of true, but we have enough experimental evidence through science and stuff to show that we get socialized. And if you're in a certain environment, you will evolve to your environment. And does that make you that environment? No, it just makes you something that's living in it and participating in it. So, you know, if you find out that, hey, I'm in a toxic environment and I'm toxic as well because I'm playing a part in it, being able to separate yourself from that means that you need to not identify with the environment or the group or the life story. So freedom, which I think is my ultimate point here, is seeing that you don't know. And by willing to go into the unknown, not because you know it's there, but because you know what's inside of you is having conflict with the known, that's what makes you go to the unknown. And that unknown is the place when the known is not right, when it's not working. And I think everybody has a little bit of both, some more than others. But you have a little bit of the known that's working and a little bit of the known that isn't working. And the problem is you won't let go of the part that isn't working, and you're defining yourself by it, with it, and it's limiting you and it's confining you, you know? And I think it plays into art just as much as it plays into life.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I love what you said. I'm just sort of like hung up on a couple of words that you said a little while back. I'm like, that's quotable for me. But like you said freedom is realizing you don't know. It was something like that. Or freedom is seeing that you don't know. That was it. It was seeing. Freedom is seeing that you don't know. Really seeing that you don't know. That's great stuff, man. That's really great because I've, a lot of my own experiences tell me that that's like, yeah, that's true, which makes it kind of so funny because that is so opposite to how, most of us live our day-to-day lives. We think freedom comes through knowing.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I just got to know more stuff. I've got to know more stuff. And, there's that whole old adage of, that's been around for years where it's just like, that sort of almost philosophical, joke that just like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Right? But how many of us are caught in this trap of just like, yeah, but I swear, once I know this, then I'll be free. Then I'll really be good. But it's like it's craziness. And just through, again, like for myself as an actor, to bring it back, like that was such an incredible realization for me, was kind of this journey of where it started as something that's like, it was just fun. It was just play. And, yes, there was emulating and mimicking, but I was figuring some things out along the way. And I had certain qualities to my acting, when I first started out, that people really enjoyed because it was just like throwing caution into the wind. I'm just going for it. Even if I'm copying somebody, I'm just going for it, 100%.
Yes.
And that opened up certain opportunities and doors for me that allowed me to take next steps. And then, I went and I got training. I learned how to, be technically more proficient and understand more about the mechanics of what I was doing. But then I fell into the trap of thinking that was it. Like that was what I do, was these mechanics. Mm-hmm. And in that mindset, I lost a lot of the beautiful qualities that I'd started out with. I'd even had people say that to me. They're like, when you started, you had these things. And I was like, holy shit, I lost these qualities. How did that happen? And it was like, there was no more joy because it was just, acting had become just this set of mechanics and how you do it right, because there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it now. Whereas that wasn't really a thing for me, when I first started out. It was just, it was more so a thing I just played with. Not that my acting was perfect when I was young. I had a lot to learn for sure. But after going through a period of just like this sort of joyless acting for a while, where I just it was really just looking at it in the wrong way, I guess. And then discovering that it was that place of not knowing, that once I learned, and this was through training, which is like amazing that training can do that for you. But, came across a really wonderful teacher who took me through a process, and suddenly it was just like, oh, holy shit, my work is so much better if I don't know. If I approach this, if I walk out here and start this scene from a place of I don't know, and always being in a place of I don't know. It was like I'm free. Like I'm absolutely free again. It was like kind of getting it back, but at the same time I was getting something new as well, because I had all of this other stuff that, I learned along the way, but I now had the freedom to use that knowledge or not use that knowledge. I could go anywhere, I could do anything, and it was exciting. It was fun, and all of these wonderful things. So, I don't know necessarily where I was going with that. I was just trying to affirm, the point that you made of just like, yeah, freedom is seeing that you don't know. I think that's just wonderful.
I thought what you said was great, and I think it pairs with acting, and I totally am on board with all the experiences you had in that medium. And I've also had that experience with writing, and I guess with filmmaking to some degree, but definitely it's like, I think the thing is, you learn the craft, you learn technique so that you can forget it. But the early stages, you think you're learning it so that you know it. You're thinking you learn it so that then you have the answer. And the truth is, you learn it so that you don't need it. But if you don't learn it, you're it's harder to be self-guided. Like, this is something, and you and I identified this early on. We've talked about this a lot, where it's like people watch a performance or they read a script and they see someone do something really well, and then they write a book about it, and then they tell you, this is how you do it. And really, all they did was observe a performance or observe a story, and then they broke down how it was done as though that's some technique to like do it again. But the problem is that when that happened, most often, it didn't happen out of technique. It happened out of spontaneity. But then when you try to technique it, you create a fake, you create a copy, a carbon copy of it. It's not real. It's remnants of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think
it's kind of a hollow shell.
It's like a hollow shell. Yeah, exactly. And there's these things, and I see it particularly with writing. But I think that with like writing, particularly with storytelling, I actually think it's really, really good to try to learn the rules, like guidelines, rules, you want to call them that, but they're not real rules. But learn them so that you can break them. Learn them so that you can bend them. Learn them so that you can manipulate them, move them around. James Cameron, who's doing a course I'm doing right now on Masterclass, I've only done a bit of it so far, but everything he says has just been really, really good in this course so far. And, he was talking about like the 3-act structure, for example, in a story. And he's like, you need to learn the 3-act structure so that you can talk about a story to other writers and other people, because people understand the 3-act structure. But you don't need to have 3 acts. You could have 5 acts, 7 acts, 4 acts. You could have a whole bunch of different things. You could be like Tarantino and mix up the acts and throw them in different orders, But the thing is that you learn them so that you have a basic context and the ability to communicate it. But he really kind of made me see that, he just articulated in a way that really helped me kind of see that, yeah, a lot of these things are only so that you have a basis of communication or a basis of understanding to kind of go like, yeah. I kind of worked it like this, but then I let it go, but the early creative is rigid with those things. They stick to it. They try to do it as it is. And that's the problem, because that's writing like, and I know that something I've learned through writing, and I guess through acting as well, is that when you do that, you always rob yourself of something. If you let go of that, it will serve you when you need it. It'll be there when you need it, like a tool that you need. Like, I need to amplify the stakes here, like as a writer. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, well, I need to make the emotional drop lower, and I need to make the climax higher. I need to, or whatever, even if it's not the whole story, but it's just a scene, or I need to I need to make the arc of the character change more over the course of these next 2 minutes. Like I need them to have more of a discovery. The discovery needs to be a bigger thing. But you understand how to articulate that in your head, what you're trying to do, but it's not a rule. It's just it's a process that you're applying, going, oh, this was a technique I learned along the way, and you're using it to assist yourself in a discovery. Because, you know, I talked about this last podcast, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. You paint your character into a corner you don't know how to get out of. That's the unknown. But if you paint them into a corner you know how to get out of, it's boring, you know? So you got to try to push yourself into areas that are uncomfortable, and areas that are, you know, that force you to dig. Like you got to dig inside to find it. And then don't wimp out when you can't find the answer right away. Like just keep digging and digging and digging and struggle and bang your head against the wall and just like, there's something in here and I got to get down in it. And then when you find it, it'll be super rewarding, you know? That's just writing. I feel with acting or painting or filmmaking or anything else, it's a little bit different in those mediums maybe, but it's essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an acting teacher say the exact same, phrase that you did, like as an actor, it's like you paint yourself into a corner, right? Like it was like, you've got to paint yourself into a corner in terms of, how you've sort of, set yourself up in this world, but like, I think that, it's interesting that we've gotten into some of this territory about, like technique and knowledge and its place and how it's useful and knowing it so that you can just, throw it away. Because and very much a lot of it does actually come down to a certain kind of convention of language, I've got like this book coming out in a little while, for actors. And like one of the things that I took on just as like a small sort of like part of it, right, was I did sort of a little critique and reimagining of the kind of language that actors use, right? The kind of stuff that, you and I like were exposed to in classrooms. And it's like, yeah, there's a function to it to be able to talk about objectives and stakes and obstacles and all that kind of, and beats and all this kind of shit, right? But there was a certain level to which I was challenging some of it because I'm like, well, let's not lose what these things mean, like let's get to the real meaning of it, because there's a lot of sort of that language that I don't care for it. I don't care for talking about, how human beings are, like what it's like to be human in terms of you have obstacles and you have objectives and you have state. Like, I'm just like, this is some of it's a little bit crazy to me, but I understand that there's sort of a function in being able to discuss that to a certain level. And I remember a certain point, where I was all about that stuff, like having, those coffee sit downs with your fellow like actors and who you were in class with and stuff, and talking about, it's like, what, I really need to go for my obstacle the next time I go in that scene. That's what it needs to be. And now just sort of being like, yeah, like, objectives. Yeah, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, I get what it, that stuff. I still use these things. I still apply these things to a certain extent, but I just have a different place for it now. It's not the thing anymore, that I'm like, yeah, this is what's going to drive my acting to being incredible. It's just like, yeah, no, this is just helps to lend a shade, of a color, a shade to what I'm doing. Right. But it's not the whole thing. I can't hang my hat on any one of these things in particular. I always bring this up probably on this podcast, but to like my students as well. It was something that Daniel Day-Lewis said in an interview many years ago, but basically saying like, it's all about developing an understanding that will enrich you in the moment, right? Like, so it's not about saying like, okay, look at me play my objectives in this scene, what I'm after in this scene. It's just like, no, it's there. Like, it's you've done it so that you don't have to think about it. Like, you've given that concept some consideration and felt into it for a period of time. But now it's like that's not the whole thing, and you're making a big mistake if that's what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, but it's there to enrich, which I think is part of the challenge, and it's one that I know I've dealt with, and I see a lot of actors and artists deal with, is trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to trust that work that you did is going to show up on its own accord, right? But going back to that control thing, we think that we have to like, whip it out. We've got to like, just like, okay, that work that I did, I've got to whip it out while I'm up here on stage, and I've got to wave it around in front of everybody and say like, look. Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see everything that I've done?
Oh,
and
man.
it's just,
are we still talking about art or?
Well, this is what but like, kidding. No. Like, I realized what I was saying at a certain point. I'm like, I realized the double entendre of what I'm saying, but it's kind of the same thing to a certain extent. It's just when you're like, it's not the same thing, but it's obnoxious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One way or the other, it's obnoxious, and don't do it. Don't wave that shit around, like, go on that I don't know journey of what's going on. Maybe you don't know what you want in this scene. Maybe you don't really know what your objective is. You think you know what it is, but maybe if you open yourself up, you'll discover that there's something much bigger going on.
Mm-hmm. It's something I learned through writing. And I think this kind of, on the Love Lost script that I wrote, because I wrote it like a play, and I was fully intending to put it up on stage. But something I learned through that process was that the objective really can change as you go through the story. And so there's what the character thinks they want, and then there's what they need. And both of those things are often actually quite unknown to the person. So like what you think you want is sometimes not really what you want. And so you're going for this thing you think you want. And this is like life, right? You're going for this thing you think you want. And at a certain point in the story, you realize, I thought I wanted this, and now it's become that. And so you were wrong up until you had this discovery, but it was true that you were going for what you thought you wanted because you thought you wanted it. And like, this is kind of the complexity of storytelling. When an actor is playing a scene, I really think that, you can look at it and kind of recognize that, like, there's no definitive answer to this stuff. Although it looks like there's this whole area of unknown, because I often find that when I write stuff, and I'm just finding this more and more as I've written more, was that people will tell me things that they saw in the writing that I didn't see. But when they tell me, I'm like, well, that's true. But I didn't know that was true. So like, you're trying to do something, and if you don't control it too much, you don't realize that, like, you think you're doing this, but you're really doing that. And I feel like I'm talking kind of crazy here, but like in a weird way. But like, okay, let's say you're on a date, and you think you want this person to like you, so you're going to go out and impress them. So your tactic is to do blah 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 blah, and I'm going to impress them, and I'm going to get them to like me. And partway through this experience, you start to realize that them liking you or them being impressed by you is not actually important. So what do you do now? Right? Do you just give up? Do you walk away? Do you end it there? Or do you open yourself up to something else? Maybe this date, maybe this thing you're on is something different that you didn't know and didn't expect. And I think that like good storytelling, good acting, good filmmaking, it has an element of this quality where you kind of look at it like there's something happening beyond what I think is happening. And so you're not so arrogant as to say like I know, but you say like I think I know. I think I know. I think I know what's going to happen. But then I don't. And that's that great little kind of conflict that we need. We need you to think you know what you're doing because, and I can tell you why this is so important as a writer and as a director, because you thinking you know what's going to happen and then it changing, that's lightning in a bottle. That's what we're trying to capture. So if you don't
it's the
leave
spaghetti
room,
on the floor.
it's the spaghetti on the floor. Exactly. Thanks for tying that all in, man. It's the spaghetti on the floor. And in the spaghetti on the floor it flips the boat. It throws everything off. Because now I'm in this fight with this girlfriend probably, or this friend of mine. I don't remember what it was. And now we have to clean up the spaghetti. We have to deal with the spaghetti together. And it just, if you're open to that, it can show the relationship. It can show the love. It can show the teamwork. It can show all sorts of stuff. And in the meantime, you're like fucking yelling at the person and saying shit. And at the same time, you're like, if you really have built the relationship with them, all of a sudden that's going to bring something out. And that's just magic. It's magic. And, that's the thing. That's that it is the magic spaghetti sauce, man. It's that stuff that you got to leave a little room for. And I think it is to think, because I think when you write a script, you don't want to go into it willy-nilly. And I'm pretty sure, you could probably say this with most things, doing a painting, making a song, anything. You don't go into it totally willy-nilly. You kind of go into it with like, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do. And then when you start getting into it, then you let the new thing that you didn't know was happening happen. And it just goes beyond what you think you're going to do. And then maybe you go, well, no, I thought I was doing this. And now I think I'm doing that. And then that changes. And it's, oh, I thought I was doing this. And then that, now I think I'm doing this. And that, all those twists and turns and discoveries of you finding your way, they're not only, I think, what makes your art truly fascinating, but it makes you kind of fascinating to you because it's all new. It's all something that's happening.
Yeah.
It's alive.
You're really engaged. Like you've brought another, I think, really interesting piece into this conversation and interestingly, this has been kind of about like knowing and not knowing and thinking, and not, it's like, I love it. I love it. But the whole thing of like thinking, what you want is a really fascinating side to this for me because, I think that's sort of integral to everything that we've been talking about. Like you're starting out, you want to do this thing, and you want to do this thing. You have no experience with how you're going to do this thing. You only kind of have the, what you've seen before and what you've seen in other people and the shit that you think that's kind of cool and whatever. And so you think that is what you want, and in, like you said, in many ways it is. Like in many ways it is what you want, but it gets you going. Like it gets you moving, it gets you heading in the direction. And I think that it's really about, while you're in that space of sort of that beginner's space, which is such a beautiful place to be, the beginner's mind, as they say. But while you're in that space of being open, that I think that you've spoken about beautifully here, of I think I know what this is. I think I know where I'm going. I think I know what I want, but I'm open to that possibly changing. I'm open to something happening that helps me to see that, oh, this is actually what it's really about. I thought I was doing this, but it's actually shown me that what I'm really doing is this. It can really help us discover greater meaning, and it can take us from that place of sort of copying and emulation and all that stuff, and take us into a place of like, oh, holy shit, I've really am starting to discover who I am in this. I'm really starting to discover what my expression is, and that's an ongoing process. That's a never-ending ongoing process. And that's not a sad thing. That's not a thing for us to kind of bemoan that. It's like, oh, what? It's never going to end. It's like, yeah, it's never going to end. Isn't that incredible? Like there's going to be twists and turns the whole ride of your life. There's going to be twists and turns, and you take what you've got at this moment and you head towards that thing that's exciting with whatever you have, and be open the whole time to being shown something new, to growing, learning, having everything completely turned on its head and embracing it. Embrace that spaghetti on the floor, because it's like, the acting metaphors are really terrific for this, because, actors always talk, in the classroom, it's just like, oh, those unexpected moments are the best, they're those things that can really just set a scene off. Like they can really just do something quite extraordinary. Like the spaghetti falling to the floor, and like it's funny because, like it's one of those things where as actors, you'll go like, oh shit, like this happened. Like you were talking about, like the scene is ruined. The scene is like, do we even continue on? But then it's just like, you let that thing happen and you have an audience just captive, just being like, holy shit, that spaghetti just hit the floor. And these two are having an argument. They're getting into it while they have to clean the spaghetti up. Like there's something so like I never saw this when this happened, but like, I'm just picturing it and I'm just like, that's just beautiful. Like how incredible, just some, like a domestic spat, an argument happening, over the course of cleaning up this mess that you've now made, like there's something so beautiful about that image that I've created in my mind about it, which maybe is nothing like what it actually looked like, but there's something really extraordinary about that, and it comes out of something that was not planned, was not anticipated, but it can, if you take it and you go with it, something really incredible happens. Like, I don't think people necessarily always understand these little things that happen,
No.
and
No, we definitely don't.
yeah.
I mean, like, let's take this further, right? Let's kind of go back to kind of where we started. We talk about emulating, right? And modeling and copying. So let's say someone sees this scene and they go, oh, I get it. We need to have an error happen. We need to have a mistake happen. So they manufacture it. And there's something inauthentic about the way it's manufactured, right? And it's like, I know what I'll do. I'll manufacture this mistake and then they have to clean it up. And you don't understand, well, why hasn't it got the same quality, right? Because it's like you're trying to take something as the strategy. And when life is spontaneous, the strategy is in the spontaneity. It's not in the copying of something you've already seen or something that's already been done. It's in the moment of letting that moment be the thing you're dealing with. If you're going to take anything from the spaghetti story, and I mean, I know you know this, but I say this, to our audience out there, but it's like, take that by opening yourself up to things going awry, to things not going as planned, to things being a discovery. you allow the potential for something to happen that's not in your spectrum or your peripheral or your vision of the plan. And to further this whole point, needing things to go to plan all the time is part of the problem. That somehow the plan is perfect. This assumption that the plan is perfect is just not true. It's like we need to kind of give ourselves room to have our lives and our art happen outside of what we think and what we plan.
For a little bit more abandon.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like just your story. I've never heard that one. Actually, I thought I knew so many of your acting stories, but that's a great one.
Might have been before we met, actually.
Maybe
it was. Yeah.
Jeez, that's a long time ago. Mm-hmm. But it just like it reminded me, like I've had, situations like that happen doing a scene before, and like it made me think of this one scene that I was doing where I was playing someone who was blind. It's from a play called Butterflies Are Free, which came out in like the 60s or something. They made a movie out of it with Goldie Hawn. Anyhow, I just remember this one point in the scene, and we're performing it in front of her. It wasn't a rehearsal. We were performing it. And in this scene, there's sort of like this, my character is self-conscious and doesn't feel good enough for this girl and all this stuff. And, they're kind of having like a bit of a fight breakup type of a situation. And in the scene, I'm like, I have to, because they're like, he's talking about like, oh, let me make you a sandwich or whatever. So I've got to make sandwiches, right? And like in being sort of like, I had to do something like with the way I was using my eyes to create the effect of not being able to see. And in doing that, I really wasn't able to see well. And so I wasn't actually like able to look at what I was doing with the bread and like everything else that I was doing. So I was feeling it all out, right? And we'd rehearsed it and stuff and had figured it out. But in this scene where things are starting to like really build up and boil up, I'm trying to make these sandwiches. And I remember at one point just feeling down and realizing that I'd pulled out an extra piece of bread from the bag. And I remember just feeling it with my hands and realizing that I had too much bread on the counter. And it was like, but it was so incredible because like with what was going on in the scene and sort of the self-consciousness of the character being blind and that made him not good enough. And suddenly I made this mistake in pulling out too much bread. It was like this lump just went like right in my throat. And it was just like, it was this unexpected thing that just drove the scene in this way that I'm like, I don't know if anybody even noticed that. Like, I don't know if anybody realized in that instant what happened, that like, oh, he pulled out too much bread or whatever, even if my scene partner noticed that happened, but I did, and it had an effect on what was going on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting how that stuff happens and how you don't know just how much of an impact it can have.
Well, and I think that's a good point because it can happen on a micro level or a macro level. Like it can be a private thing, for you as an actor, whereas like the spaghetti thing involved kind of the scene and the audience clearly saw it and all of that, right? The bread thing was a more intimate, personal thing, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't just as important and just as impactful. It's just not as obvious, and I think that there's a really good point in that, which is that these unknown things don't have to be obvious. They don't have to be these big, like scene changing alteration type of moments. They could be like, oh, I pulled out 3 pieces of bread and I only needed 2 and I'm blind and trying to deal with this is making this kind of weird. And that all of a sudden makes this little moment a little more real, a little more something, a little more special. And these can happen like tens of hundreds of times in the course of a creation. So, like this is why I think it's interesting, this conversation, right? Because I think that we start from this emulation model. We start from this kind of modeling, emulating, copying, and all of that's just kind of, I want to do what I've seen. I want to play at that. I want to try it. And then once you get some competence at that and you get a feel for it, then it becomes about, am I willing to abandon what I've already seen done? Am I willing to abandon how I think this works? Am I willing to be open to dealing with it, to challenge myself with it a little bit? Because that's when it starts to get interesting, and I think you need to be willing to look bad. I think that's a really key component to it. You need to be willing to fail, to make a mistake, to get stuck, to embarrass yourself. You need to be willing to do all these things. And with that room that you give yourself, you also give yourself the room to be great. You give yourself the room to do something amazing, something special, something incredible. And it's that juxtaposition, right? Because in one moment you make a fool of yourself, in the next you make a hero of yourself, and you have room. But if it's all controlled, you don't get either, but you get a very safe, controlled thing. And there's no freedom in that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's kind of what we've come to, right? There is no freedom in the sticking to the plan and staying controlled and relying entirely on technique. That's where it becomes kind of placid and boring, and it might do the job, but it's nothing special about it. There's nothing memorable about it. And not just for others, but for you. It's just, you did the job. And I think that, way of the artist, our whole philosophy is like, well, let's make your life a masterpiece, right? And this is kind of advice to do that. This is about how you make your life a masterpiece, not how you make your life a job you get done.
Yeah. How you really do your job.
Yeah.
Well,
beer?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. This one's from Scotland. I don't know if that was terrible.
We've just lost all of our audience.
We lost everybody.
Just like, screw this guy.
Look, I don't know. I just threw it in there. I wasn't trying. Okay, it's Innis and Gunn. Innis and Gunn. And this is a lager, and it's from Scotland. And it's delicious. And, back in the day when you and I were in acting school, I don't know if you remember this, but our friend Hillary, she would always get it. And it kind of came one of the beers that was like the go-to beers when we went out for beers after acting class. And I was like, you know what? I haven't had that one in a while. Let's try it out. And it's delicious.
Maybe we should. Excellent. I was going to say, maybe we should get Hillary on the show.
We should
have a chat with her. She's fucking great.
Yeah, she is.
I've got a little bit of a twist on this one today because, we hadn't planned on recording today, and then it just sort of worked out that we had to record today. So I don't have a craft beer.
Okay.
However, what was in the fridge was a craft cider from literally like half a click away from me. Which, if there's people out there, apparently click is a Canadianism. It's a Canadian term. It means kilometer, to anyone who doesn't know. So it's like half a click away, and from a place called Sunday Cider. And this is called their Sunday Rosé. And it says, enjoy juicy layers of fresh fruit and flowers, ripe Okanagan apples, co-fermented with Saskatoon berries, hibiscus, and elderflowers. Bright and dry, easy like Sunday. And it's delicious.
Like a so serious Sunday.
Yeah. Hey, look at that. I didn't even think about that. That's hilarious.
It all works out.
Yeah, man. I brought the Sunday to the podcast. We didn't have. Well, look at that. It's funny how these things work out, eh?
It is. Eh? All right, let's wrap this baby up. I think we talked a good talk. We talked a good game.
Yeah. Yes, we did.
I like this one. This was a fun talk, and actually I'm going to walk away with a bit more clarity. And I think these are kind of things that I was aware of, but this talk that we had gave me a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit more confidence to just trust myself, where I've gotten to in my own creative career. Because I've been really, I got to tell you, I haven't really told you this one-on-one recently, but I've been really thinking I'm ready to write my next script. Like the bug is in me now, man. I
Beautiful.
don't know, the creative, like it's been a little while, but the creative juices are flowing and the ideas are popping off, and I'm just like, okay, like I'm ready. But I think I'm going to take this talk into this next project and just, I think I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to let it unfold, and I'm going to trust that in thinking I know what I'm doing, that's enough. Because I think I've been holding off on some things because it's like I don't really know, but it's like no, that's not important. You have enough. I do. I know I have enough. I have enough the technique, the skill, the craft. I got all that stuff figured out. I have a lot of the characters and ideas worked out for some of these things, and I know that really it's just time to just get started. I think I know what I'm doing, and then I'm going to let it unfold, and I'll deal with it as it comes up. And I think this is kind of not just for my next creative project, but I'm going to apply that to life as well, because, it's been interesting that way, because I realize, yeah, like I just got to grant myself the allowance to be free, and it seems so simple, and it really is. But I just needed this talk, I think, to get that final little piece of this puzzle kind of. It's like I feel like I just built the bridge today, to cross whatever it is I'm trying to cross creatively. So maybe someone else can take something from that, but that's what I'm going to do.
Nice. Yeah, this has been a terrific one, and there's been so much about unknown in this that I didn't expect, because we kind of just jumped into this conversation with like this exact podcast has sort of been an embodiment of sort of what we talked about, and
Yeah.
and I think that's again funny how these things work out.
Yeah. Actually, can I stop you? That's a great example of like just what I just said. Yeah. We started this with going, I think we know what we're doing. We
Yeah,
think we know what we're doing. And then it was enough. That's enough. And I'm really happy with this talk. I mean, maybe there's some audience members out there that enjoyed it as well, but it's like, it really was enough to get a conversation going. And in some ways, not knowing was actually what benefited it, at least
yeah,
for me.
yeah. I think that sort of what it's showing me is like, it's like, do you have enough do you have your jumping off point? Do you have enough that you can jump off from? Because that's all you need. You know what I mean? Like that's all you need, and the rest is gonna show itself to you. And yeah, again, that's such an acting, wisdom right there. You just need enough to jump off of, and now go. Like see what happens. And I want to refer again to what you said earlier, which is, freedom is seeing that you don't know. And I think that there's this sort of journey that we all go through in our lives, and particularly if you're in creative enterprise and the arts and stuff, where it's like, you start from this place where it's like, you don't know what you're doing, but you got energy and excitement and passion and and the willingness to just try things out, and you do it, and you don't know, and you maybe realize that you in a weird way kind of do know a few things about this, and then you go through a stage where you maybe get a bit more serious about it, and then suddenly you're learning all of these things, someone's teaching you all of these things, and you're like, holy shit, I don't know anything. And so then you go in this process of like, okay, well, I know all of these things, but then you've got to let that shit go, right? And now go back to kind of, and then go into a stage of being like, okay, well, I don't know again, right? But you're saying I don't know from a different place
Yes.
than you were before. You're saying I don't know from a place of just open acceptance and excitement and you've got everything you need to make that jump. Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.